We'd like to get started. Welcome you here and thanks for coming. I have one little blurb to read here before we start. Following that, one of our assistant superintendents, Dave Hales, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Public notice has been given that the Board of Trustees of the Local Building Authority of Weber School District will hold an organizational meeting at 6:45 p.m. or immediately following this regular Weber School District Board meeting tonight. The organizational meeting of the Local Building Authority will include appointing officers, adopting bylaws, setting meeting dates, and related matters. Mr. Hales.
Would the audience please join me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. We'd like to turn some time over to Mr. Clyde Moore to make a presentation.
President Widdowson, Board, Superintendent Butters. I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize and celebrate one of our own, Dr. Rob Belknap. And I'm going to ask him to join me up here at this time. Dr. Belknap was recognized in February at our state CTE conference as the State Administrator of the Year for the state of Utah for 2023. And this qualified for him to be nominated and recognized at our region conference. So he was presented there and recognized as our Region 5 ACTE Administrator of the Year. And that region include those states listed there on the board. So it's pretty steep competition. Several states there represented. And Dr. Belknap was recognized as Administrator of the Year for ACTE. I might like to make a few comments about Dr. Belknap, that I reached out to some of his coordinators and teachers and spoke with them in the past week about his leadership. First of all, since Dr. Belknap has been our CTE director, he's innovated our program. Some of the comments I heard from his coordinators and teachers, they say he provided visionary leadership focused on collaboration, programs and development, and student involvement. That's a big thing for Dr. Belknap. One of my assignments is working with him in the CTE program and supporting him. And in every meeting, Dr. Belknap, he talks about the student participation in his programs in the schools. That's a big thing for him, and he's done a great job with that. He also, as you know, introduced the construction pathway, and that's the building of our tiny homes. The one that was built this year was, I guess, sold to Salt Lake City to be a part of their homeless village shelter down in Salt Lake. We walked through that tiny home, and they did a great job. They had to meet the specs of the Salt Lake City Zoning Commission, so they did a good job with that. Some other programs he introduced into and had brought into the program to the district is the outdoor product design program. And if you know that Utah State have a strong outdoor designing program, and Rod has connected with Utah State and patterned his program in our schools after that, and they got a great relationship with Utah State. Also introduced the drones in the classroom program on student learning how to fly drones. And can they get certified in that, Rod, through the program? So that's a way our student can also get certified to fly drones. He also partnered with an OTech school and done a great job with that. And then he also brought in an AM STEM program. I think that's at Roy High, right? And then as well as composite. So he brought in a lot of different programs that give our students many opportunities to participate in our CTE program. Done awesome with that. Next. Another comment I got from one of the teachers that I think she's at Wildquest. She mentioned that Dr. Belknap, his leadership has also promoted our CTSOs program. And CTSO stands for Career and Technical Student Organization. And Rod shared this with me in one of our monthly meetings when I met with him. Our program had increased participation by 51%. That's the largest growth in the state. So he's done an awesome job with that. One of the comments the teachers made about Rod was say he's progressive in his thinking, he's a dreamer, and a forward thinker. And she also said that sometimes it takes us a bit of time to catch up with Rod and see his vision, but we do get there, and he brings us along, would also help the students. I think Rod's goal from talking to him is to have our program to be recognized not only as one of the best in the state, but one of the best in the nation. And I think we're headed in that direction. I'd just like to commend Dr. Belknap on his work in our CTE program as our CTA director. Thank you, Rod.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
Board, Superintendent Butters, and Clyde, thanks a lot for taking the time to do this and for the recognition, and really appreciate the leadership of our district, and really appreciate the support that you give the CTE programs throughout the district. We have amazing teachers and coordinators and people in CTE that help make these things happen, and so many people in this room, as I look around, have been cooperative, so cooperative and helpful with some of the things that were up there, and those cannot be done without the help of everybody here, and so and many of the people that aren't here. So I really appreciate everyone's support and their kindness and taking an opportunity to this recognition. I thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, I want to take an opportunity to recognize my family that came here tonight. My wife Gina is right there. She made the escape from girls camp. So that's awesome. Yep. Can't believe they let you out of there. And then my daughter, Brianne, and appreciate her being here. I think she's relieved because she just passed her nursing exam or something today. So you can sense, right? That's good. Thanks, Chandler. And Chandler, my new son-in-law, really appreciate him being here. So that should score some points. That's great. And then my dad, Dennis, it's right back there, and my mom, Leanne. It's great to have them here. They've been biggest supporters throughout my life, so really appreciate my family being here, and thanks again to everyone.
Thanks, Rod.
Can I make a comment really fast? As a parent, when I go to help my high school students register for classes, especially with my oldest, I was completely overwhelmed with the amount of CTE classes offered at our high school, which is which was overwhelming for me as a parent, but also like completely amazing. I remember looking at that course catalog of CTE classes and just going, none of these were not offered. I mean, clearly drones was not offered when I was in high school, but just the depth of the amount of CTE classes, and so we owe that to you. Also, like I've mentioned to you before, I really wish our state graduation requirements required a credit and a half of CTE instead of art. I think so. I should lobby for that. But anyways, and also I loved the tiny homes. What you're doing there was amazing. I was really grateful that I could go and see that. So anyways, I just want to make that comment. Thanks, Rod.
Great job, Rod. Every time I think I'm getting my head wrapped around CTE, Rod grabs me by the arm and we have another discussion, and there's a whole nother world out there. It just keeps expanding and expanding. What a wonderful job. Rod's dad was one of the premier cabinet builders in the area for a lot of years. I don't know how many of my brothers and sisters have his cabinets in their house. It runs in the blood. Great job. Yeah, very well done. Very well done. Thanks, everyone. Moving on our agenda, board, we'd like to have a motion to approve our consent calendar for this past month. Doug, do we have a second? Jan, any discussion on that? All those who could vote positive in that to approve that?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Let's move on to some discussion items on the agenda. ratification of our employee contracts, Nicole Mipus.
President Widdowson and Superintendent Butters and board members. We'd like to present to you the summaries for our negotiated agreements. We have completed the certified, classified, and administrative agreements. So we'll start with the certified agreement first. In it says that the compensation insurance will be fully funded for lane changes, step increases, and a 3% base increase, which will also include the $4,200 added to the salary for the legislative R277-110. So that will be added to the salary. Insurance, Laurie Adams was able to take the helm on the insurance, and she did a wonderful job leading that committee, and was able to get us at a 4.9% increase, which the district will pay its share of that cost. We were also able to enhance our benefits with dental and add an implant benefit and increase orthodontics coverage. We also will be switching our voluntary insurance products. We've currently been with Washington National and Aflac, and we will now be going through our open enrollment with GBS. It'll go through that same process as our regular insurance, and with Voya is the name of that vendor. So that will change. And then on the negotiated educator contract, we've listed there just a summary of the updates that we made to the language on the to align with our agreement, with our policies and our practices. So you can look through those items. And then just to go over the MOUs, our memorandum of understanding, we were able to continue number 1 and number 2, which is the professional learning days, and number 2 is the aggressive student behavior. Those MOUs will continue. MOU number 3 is the extra duty coverage, was drafted to assemble a committee to explore possibilities for secondary extracurricular duties to be modified. So these MOU committees will take a look at that and see if there needs to be any changes, and if there's any suggested changes at the end of that committee research, then we could look at negotiating that into the contract and implementing those changes. MOU number 4 is the evaluation procedure. We are going to extend that MOU. We'd like to continue to work on fine-tuning our new evaluation tool and process. MOU number 5 is a personal leave allowance, so it's a flex leave option that will be for all 3 of our groups, so certified, classified, and administrative groups. We'd like to take a look at if we were to take a sick day and be able to allow our employees to flex that into a personal or vacation day. MOU number 6 will be completed. That is our catastrophic leave bank, and that will be done September 30th, so that will be phased out. And then we'd also like to put a committee together for an MOU around parent-teacher conferences. I felt like it was time to take a look at how we run our parent-teacher conferences and see if there's some changes or ways that we could do that more effectively. Any questions on the certified negotiations agreement summary? Okay. So then if we move on to the classified and administrative negotiated summaries, there's some a lot of similarities there. So on both of those agreement summaries, it states that we will fully fund, the district will fully fund lane changes and step increases there as well, and we will be adding a 6% base increase. Weaver School District has done a really phenomenal job over many years of making sure that we are equitable in our increases to all employees. So in order to be competitive with what our educators are receiving, a 6% increase for our classified and administrators is where we settled. Again, we've covered the insurance. A couple of other things to note with the insurance changes is our open enrollment dates will change from August 1st to August 15th. And our plan year will now begin September 1st instead of October 1st. And that way the the teachers that we hire will not have to enroll twice into the insurance, because they get hired on and then the plan year changed and then have to redo it again a month later. So we've updated that, and our deductibles also have increased slightly to keep that 4.9% rate low. So we're going to go from a $3,000 to a $3,500 per person, and $6,000 to a $7,000 for a family maximum. And then we also, in both agreements, we updated the language again to align with our practices and our policies. In the classified agreement summary, the MOUs that we will work on in that summary is we've completed MOU number 1, well, in number 1 and number 3 are on hold as we decide on funding and being able to take a look at those later on. Number 4, the fleet technicians, we are able to add 2 of those due to the increased growth in our district with the new schools and the needed bus routes. And so we will add 2 fleet technicians to help work on our buses. And then we have completed MOU number 5 as we've moved to the new platform now. MOU number 2 is to take a look at our paraprofessional group. That has been our most challenging group to be able to retain and recruit employees for that position. So we want to take a look at what can we do to better enhance and retain our employees in that group. And then MOU Flex Leave, I talked about previously that will continue for this group as well. And then in the administrative summary, the MOU that we're going to work on in that one is around the salary schedule. Again, just to make sure that we are comparing ourselves to other districts surrounding us and other like districts to make sure that we're staying competitive in what we're doing with our salary schedule. Any questions on either one of those? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. I would look for a motion to approve the ratification of the employee contracts as outlined by Director Mivas. Kelly, and a second on that. Any discussion from anyone? All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Let's move on now to approval of some revised policies. We've got a number of them here by Heidi Alder.
Good evening, Board, President Whittison, Superintendent Butters. All of the policies that are being presented today are presented on second reading. We reviewed all of them last month, and I will just start numerically, and we'll go through. And I'll share with you what has been updated, if anything, since the last time we presented the policy. Policy 1130 is the entitled Board Meeting. And we updated it, presented it to the board last month to include procedures surrounding public comment that were not in the previous policy. We did make one change we made several changes in response to the feedback during study session, and those were sent to you. Most of the changes were surrounding the number of minutes per comment per person who presented, the way the sign-up was presented. We had discussion, if you recall, about how individuals were going to sign up to present public comment, and it concluded that there would be an electronic sign-up and also a clipboard outside the room, and that would be available until just before board meeting for any available spots that were not taken during the electronic sign-up. There is one more change I want to bring your attention to on Section C, and I apologize, we will number these pages next time, but we did not do that this time. But the very second to last page where it says public comment period guidelines, we spoke about how in instances where there may be large groups that have a message for the board, that an individual can speak for the group, and that perhaps that individual should have more time than an individual speaking on behalf of him or herself. And we had written into the policy time period up to 6 minutes to speak, but determined upon further thought and welcome feedback, obviously, that amount is a significant chunk of the 30 minutes of the entire public comment period, and so reduce that to 3 minutes for an individual to speak on behalf of a group. Other than those changes, there were no more changes that we made since we presented this to the board last month.
Okay, thanks.
So I can understand, you had previously allowed more time, but decided that this was too much time, and so now it's 3 minutes across the board for anyone offering public opinion.
That's right.
Public comment.
That's right. So it's consistent with every person who comes up will have 3 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Board, I'd look for a motion to approve policy 1130, board meetings on a second reading. Janice and Kelly. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Heidi, go ahead.
Policy 4160, residency and enrollment. The district actually is recommending that we hold this policy until August. Last night, Board Member Larson raised some questions that we hadn't contemplated. This policy discusses boundary exceptions. The policy in its entirety is about residency and where a student is enrolled and how a student can request a boundary exception. And Board Member Larson raised the very good point that we hadn't considered, that we do have students who are enrolled in dual language immersion programs that are not at their local neighborhood school, that are out of boundary school, and those students have not historically been required to go through the boundary exception application process. And so we would want to memorialize that practice and include in the policy that if a student is on a boundary exception because of their enrollment in a dual immersion program, they don't have to follow the application process. But there were other questions that came up around dual immersion programs. For example, if a student is enrolled in a dual immersion program and attending a school outside of his or her local neighborhood school and then drops the program, unenrolls, is the student still entitled to stay in that school outside of his or her boundary, or should the student return to their neighborhood school? Also, there are times when the district discontinues a program at a particular school. And if that happens, is the student entitled to stay at that school that is not his or her neighborhood school, or return to their neighborhood school? And so those are questions that we realized late last night we need to discuss, hadn't been contemplated yet as part of this policy. And so we're asking that we hold this policy until August when we have a chance to discuss it and incorporate some of those discussions.
Can I just make a few comments? So this particularly for the other board members that I haven't discussed this with the proposed boundary changes that specifically affect the Weber cone, since that's my geographic area, there's a section of families that live in the North Ogden-Harrisville community who currently attend Majestic Elementary, Orion Junior High, and currently feed into Weber High. Now, some of that North Ogden and Harrisville community, in one of the proposals, it moves those students to Fremont. And I know we haven't discussed, or we're not at that boundary voting yet, but I've had lots and lots of parents emailing me with these specific questions regarding, okay, what happens to my student if they're enrolled in immersion? And so because of that, I felt like if we're discussing our residency and boundaries, and at some of our open houses, it was discussed, well, if you have a student in immersion, they'll be able to continue at Weber High. But I did have parents who said the same thing, like, what if they drop out their junior year? Are they gonna have to go to Fremont? Or what if the district pulls immersion? And so I just think this is a really good opportunity to table this discussion so that we can solidify that process, and then we don't have parents saying, well, my kid got to stay and my kid didn't get to stay, and we've got that policy in place. And like I said, this is mainly coming because right now, all those students, they already feed into Weber High, but there's the potential that a chunk of those immersion students will end up having Fremont as their high school, and so we need to figure out that whole process. So my motion was, do you want me to make the motion, or how does this work?
I will ask for a motion
Okay.
to table this until August, did you say?
I think we can work some language into the policy and have it be prepared
Until
for
later.
second reading in August. Later is great.
Go ahead.
No,
You-
so, do you want me to?
You want to make the motion?
Sure, because I was going to make the motion anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the motion that we table this discussion on policy 4160 until at least later.
Okay.
So we won't vote on
And-
this.
And second, any other discussion on that? I think that was a good catch.
Yeah, but otherwise,
Catch.
I just wanted to thank Heidi. I had a lot of comments, and we other than the immersion thing that literally, like a light bulb went off in my head last night. I just want to thank you for all the other small changes that we made to make a lot of those things more clear, especially around principals' discretion on making boundary decisions. So.
I don't know.
No.
Oh. Okay, so that won't impact any of our kids this year anyway, right? I mean,
As far as
It-
the not having the policy in place until the school
Yeah, it
year?
would be the
Right, not having a new policy in place will not
Yeah.
impact.
It would be for the 2024
So,
school year.
it- you know, to delay it until August
We're
will
good,
not
yeah.
really
Correct.
change.
Good question.
Correct.
Okay. Can I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks. Wonderful. Good
Okay.
catch, good catch. Go ahead. Heidi,
Moving
the
on.
next one.
Policy 4372. Policy 4372 was about our foreign students, foreign exchange students and the graduation requirements.
It says 4370 on our papers.
But there's two of them.
There are two. One is being repealed and one we're incorporating into 4370. So I apologize. 4370 is the policy that we are asking you to adopt. Thank you. 4372 is the policy that we are asking to be repealed. 4372, the substance of that policy was just incorporated into policy 4370 when we realized that the only substance of policy 4372 had to do with graduation. And since we have a policy on graduation, it just made sense to take that policy 4372 and add it to policy 4370. So the district is recommending adoption of policy 4370 on second reading and repeal of policy 4372.
Wonderful. I would ask for a motion for that approval of the 4370 and repeal of 4372. Janice, a second. Jan, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next one.
Policy
Heidi.
5220 is our student dress and grooming standards, and there were no changes made between the last time this was presented to the board and today. So the district requests the board adopt policy 5220 on second reading.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll accept a motion to approve the, on second reading, the revised policy 5220 student dress. Doug?
I'll
Second
second,
by
yeah.
Kelly. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And we'll give you one more.
And last, this is policy 7135. This is one of our human resources policies that discusses the school district LEA specific teacher licensing. There was an update since our last meeting, and this policy is numbered. The pages are numbered. So if you turn to page 2, the language in pink was added in response to the board's concern about an educator who has not obtained their associate license, just making it clear that that educator cannot advance on the salary schedule and that educator remains provisional during the time that they are working on their associate license, and that that provisional status can stay in place for up to 5 years, and they now it's articulated in the policy. So the district recommends the board adopt policy 7135 on second reading.
Wonderful, thank you. I would look for a motion to approve on a second reading 7135.
I'll make that motion,
Jan?
7135.
A second. Kelly, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed to that? Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Heidi. That was a lot. Again, we appreciate everything you do.
Get used to it. There's going to be more of these.
Dr. Robert Peterson, approval of the 2022-2023 budget, please.
Yeah, we need to.
And then Trent, just scroll down to the first page. That's table of contents, right there. Okay. Every year, we're required to approve the final budget for the current year we're in, fiscal year '23, And we have to do that by, I think the date's June 21st. And then we have to, then we approve a working budget for the next year. The reason why we call it a working budget is because it's based on estimates, one of the big ones, enrollment estimates, those kinds of things. And we really can't finalize it, but we need something to guide us over the next fiscal year, which starts July 1. I've given everyone a copy of our budget, and I'll just review the first 7 pages or so of this information, and then I'll open it up to questions. So if you go to page 1, and you can follow along, and I don't know if this pointer is going to work very good, because once you get on the screen, it kind of fades. So I'll just kind of describe it as we go. We have various funds in our budget. The biggest one is the M&O fund. We also refer to it as Fund 1. You'll notice on Fund 1 we have 3 types of funding: local, state, and federal. The big chunk of the local monies is property taxes, $28.3 million. Then interest income, investment income, and then other. These are various things that just don't fit any one category. So our total there on local funds is $33,424,000, or 11.6% of the total. State funding, as you can see, is very important. There's a state basic levy that the money is raised, and people see that on our tax notices. That goes directly to the state. It does not impact. We're not in control of that. Oh wow, that's kind of cool. Okay. Oof. Okay. All right. Okay, that might be distracting, actually. Okay, but I'll work with it. Thanks, Ryan. Anyway, then we have the biggest figure up there is the state unrestricted funds of 119 million, and then the state categorical funds, 74 million. Our 2 biggest categorical funds are special ed and CTE. Then we have a significant amount of federal funds. You can see $30,659,000. State is by far the biggest source there, 77%, followed by local and then federal. And in fact, that percentage is higher than it is in normal years because of the CARES money that we got. And so you'll see that in subsequent years kind of drop. Another fund that we have is school food services. This basically, its only purpose for this fund, you can't spend it on other things but school child nutrition services for breakfast and lunch. You will see that we didn't have very many student sales, 21,000. And the reason being is because this was the year that this was recorded. It was a COVID year, and every lunch was, we got reimbursement from this federal government. So our federal allocation is huge. It's 17 million right there, 85% of the total. You can also see state liquor fees, 2.8 million. The state liquor tax funds child nutrition programs in the state. Scroll down just a little bit, lift capital up. Okay. Then we have our capital outlay funds. The purpose of these is for building and maintaining our schools. Property taxes is significant, 16.4 million. We also have investments there, 180,000. Then sometimes we make sale of assets or transfer or those types of things. That's 2.2 million. That notes payable to be issued, that is large because we received funding because we've contracted with Johnson Controls, and they're making lots of needed upgrades in our schools. So that's usually not that high. It's 26 million. Then bond proceeds, we issued bonds that year as part of this bond cycle to build new buildings. So the local funding there is 142 million. We get a titch of state funds, almost .4? 0.04, yeah. So almost all local funds. Student activity fund, these are monies that help run the activities in our schools. It's all local, 8.1 million, spread amongst all of our schools. The foundation, they receive contributions, and we transfer money there to help fund their staff. That's all local, 1,336,000. Then we have the debt service fund. The only purpose of that is to pay off bonds. And we have several series of bonds that extend clear to the year 2042. And that's 24 million. So you can see the total revenue, all funds, the largest is still state funding, 226 million, but then we have a big chunk of local funds, especially with those building, that capital fund that's huge, and then federal funds of the 47 million. Okay, that kind of gives you a picture where we get our money. That's the purpose of this. Okay, scroll down to the expense, Trent. This is always really helpful, I think, because it shows where our priorities are, and our biggest fund is the M&O, or Fund 1, and we are all about instruction. We spend $205 million in instruction, over $200 million in instruction, and or 72.8% of the total. That is higher than the state average. We spend more on instruction than most school districts. We pride ourselves on getting as much money to the classroom as possible. We are a people business. You can see compensation is 193 million. Non-compensation, that's supplies and textbooks, those kinds of things, that's 11.4 million, almost 11.5 million. Then we have student support services. You can see the funding there. School administration and staff, district administration and staff, central, this is finance, tech, and other. The maintenance and custodial departments, 22.9 million, and transportation, 11.7 million. All in all, we were over 90% compensation on that, 9.38 on non-comp. I think one of the interesting figures there is our district administration and staff at 2%. That is extremely low compared to other districts. Also, it's extremely low compared to the private sector. I have friends who work in the private sector, and we employ 3,500 people regularly, between 3,500 and 3,800. We issue 5,400 W-2s a year, and we have a very small HR staff. Our HR staff, I have friends that are in HR in the private sector, they don't know how we function. We function and we do it well. We're very efficient. School food services, you can see the compensation there, 6.4 million. The non-compensation is 9.3. The biggest expense there is food. Capital outlay fund, we have some people that are employed through that fund, and we also have the non-compensation, which is buildings. That's a lot of our new building went on that year. Student activity fund is almost all non-compensation. The foundation is almost non-compensation. Debt service is all non-compensation. So we have a total of 72% in compensation and 122 million, or 33% non-compensation on our expense side. Okay, go to the next sheet. Okay, I'll just touch on this. Projected fund balances, you can look at that. I showed the fiscal year 22 where we ended. You can see that, I'll see if this works right here. 144 million is what's in our fund balance. The key one is this right here, 41 million, that's in our general fund. These others are earmarked for purposes. And in that general fund, we have economic stabilization, which we try to build because the ratings agencies look at that. And we also have unassigned of 16 million. I'm here to tell you we do not sit on money. We are not hoarding money. Some entities pride themselves on gargantuan fund balances. We have healthy fund balances, but like I said earlier, we get the money to this classroom. If we were sitting on piles, that would mean one of two things. We're not getting money to the classroom, or we're overtaxing our people, or both. And we don't want to do that, okay? The next section down there is, this whole section is basically what we're projecting. We're projecting positive movement in all of our fund balances except for child nutrition. They're going to spend down a fund balance, and that's the story there. Let's just go to the next page. Okay, here's the highlights. Everything is driven when it comes to maintenance operation by enrollment and ADM. ADM is the average daily membership of the prior year. You can see Weber School District's enrollment is, over the last 5 years, has grown. We grew by 512 students that year, 417. Then in the COVID year, we dropped by 391, as did almost everyone in the state, because people just kept their kids home. I also found it interesting, just a little sidebar, the parents were more likely to keep their elementary kids home than their secondary kids. I don't know what that's all about. I guess they didn't want their teenagers hanging around the house. I don't know, but it's true. And then 534, the enrollment came roaring back. And last year, we had a decrease in enrollment. And I thought, how can this be? We've had all this building going on the west side. And I was so alarmed. I got our elementary folks, because most of the decline was in the elementary, and I wanted them to get clipboards and go out there and count people head by head. But upon further examination, the entire state of Utah declined in student numbers this past October, because we're in a demographic dip. And so we weren't alone. The entire state declined. And you see these demographic lulls about every 20 years, and we're in a demographic lull. We expect it to be short-lived for a couple years and then come back up. But family sizes are also smaller than they used to be. Okay? How are the Weber area charters doing? We have several charters schools that are in our boundary, and you can see their enrollments there, and they've been holding steady for the last 3 years. And just because they're a charter school in our boundary doesn't mean all the kids are from our school district. We have a lot of kids from Davis attend like Quest Academy or Bridge Academy. We have people from Ogden City School District boundaries that attend these charters, okay? Another one I put out there that's interesting is New Ames. New Ames is not in our boundary. They have two campuses, one in Davis and one at Weber State. And they also declined in enrollment like others did this last time. We're projecting a similar slight decline in enrollment. And so I just put the same projection there. We don't know for sure. It is such a shake of the dice, because there's a lot of new building going out there, but once again, it doesn't always translate into kids. And so we're being very conservative. If the enrollment comes in, we'll get the money in October. So that's how we've budgeted. Okay? Compensation costs. Since this is our biggest expense, I thought this was an interesting thing to show you. I've not showed you this in the past. Salary and wages, you can tell over the last 5 years, they have about 70% of the total. And they've grown by 31.9%. We have two retirement programs, Tier 1 and Tier 2. If you were hired in the URS system sometime before July 1, 2011, you are a Tier 1. If you were hired after July 1, 2011, you are a Tier 2. And so you can see the Tier 1 is slowly declining as people retire and head off into the sunset. It grew by 11.89%. The Tier 2, with our new hires and stuff, is growing, and it grew in that 5-year period by 128%. At some point, long after we're gone, and I joke with Seth, my right-hand man, that when he's still here, all the Tier 1s will be gone, but I don't know if that's true, Seth. He's a young guy. Okay, then Social Security, you can see that grew by 34% over the 5 years. Insurance also grew by about 34.7%, and workers' compensation, we don't spend a lot there, but it is an expense, that including compensation. So total compensation has grown by 31.89% over the 5 years. We are compensation heavy. Okay, a lot of this was outlined by Nicole in our top priorities, because that's where we settle. We settle with our employee groups, and we sign contracts with them, and that gobbles up most of our money. So we funded steps and lanes, which is $1,189,000. In our district, as people advance in years, they move a step, and as they get further education or training, they move a lane. We also gave 6% increase to classified and admin out of the WPU, and we gave a 3% to teachers out of the WPU base increase. Plus, this year, the legislature added a 4,200 flat amount. Your average teacher increase is 9%, which we think is fantastic, because it helps us recruit teachers. And that's where it all happens, is in the classroom. Our health insurance increase, as Nicole said, was 4.9%. And for regular K-12 programs, that's about $785,000. Okay, we had other cost increases that we need to fund. The fee shortfall. We no longer can charge instructional fees, and so we're carving this out of the new WPU money, $561,000. we have individuals on the salary schedule that are not in Cactus, that's the certified database, like our school nurses and some psychologists, those kind of things, and we can't take them off the teacher salary schedule, so we're beefing that up by 203,000. Utility increase, our utilities have been flat for a number of years. You know, we're talking gas, electric, you know, water. And in the last 2 years, we've seen a steady jump up as rates have increased. And so we need to heat it, and we need to heat and cool our buildings. Even though some of our buildings still don't have AC, many of them do, okay? Also, we're excited about this, super excited about full-day kindergarten. We're able to do that in almost all of our schools except for one where there's some boundary issues, but that'll be forthcoming. And Dave Hells has been a master at this, at going out and making sure we have space and room, and it's been a great thing. And the legislature pumped money into the WPU to help us fund full-day kindergarten, okay? So roll up just a little. Oops, a little too much. Well, I'll just read it here. So where are we coming up with all the money? First, we have local revenue growth. This is just new growth that we can collect taxes off that are new houses, new businesses, not the current houses. That will be about 1.3 million. There's a line in state funding called TSSA. We get a little bit of money from that we can put into salaries. And then also they provided a flexible fund at the legislature. We're getting about 418,000 there we can put in. Our biggest source of funding is the rise of the WPU. It went up almost 6%, and I calculated a negative growth, and that also includes full-day kindergarten. So you can see we're balancing our new money with what our needs are. Now on the bottom, frankly, I think this is real exciting. When I started teaching in 1987, my first contract for Davis District was $14,600, and I never thought that teachers would crack 40,000 in my lifetime, but they have. You can see 5 years ago, we were over 42,000, 42,270, and in 5 years, we've gone up to 55,134. That's a 30% increase for teachers. We're still not at the top, obviously, but we're not at the bottom either. We feel like we're pretty competitive, and we're grateful for the $4,200 that have been appropriated by the legislature to teachers. Okay, capital outlay. This is another major fund. On November 2nd, 2021, Weber School District voters overwhelmingly approved a $279 million bond, and these were the projects that were to be funded. Westfield High School, that's the new school in Taylor, $157 million. Mountain View Junior High, that's in West Haven, and the new elementary school that's yet to be named in West Haven, and a rebuild of one of our oldest schools, Roosevelt. At the time, that was $279 million was the estimate. You can see 3 of those are under construction, and they're keeping our Larry Hadley busy. We've not started with the rebuild, well, officially not started, although there has been work around that. There has been a dramatic cost increase, and I could throw up all kinds of numbers to you, but showing construction cost increases and that kind of stuff, but we all know that intuitively. The average value of a home, this is the taxable value, not the market value. This is our taxable value. You always want your taxable value to be lower because that way your taxes aren't as high. Was $395,000 2 years ago. They've risen by 31% to $520,000. And so that's indicative of the rising cost of construction. And we're going to approach the board in subsequent weeks and months how to deal with the rising costs. Okay, next. I thought it would be prudent to follow up with the truth in taxation that we had last year. As you recall, last year in August, we had a truth in taxation hearing. Those aren't pleasant, but sometimes they're needed. And this one was very needed. These were the purposes, stated purposes at the time. We had $4.7 million of new money to go to teacher salaries and classified to be competitive. We showed charts where we were near the bottom on the Wasatch Front when it came to these, and we need the best teachers. And so then also, when you gave a raise to regular K-12 teachers, you have to worry about your special ed and other categoricals. And so there's $2.4 million there so that they don't fall too far behind as well. And then increased capital cost. As I mentioned earlier, our capital costs are just growing by leaps and bounds. These are the ongoing costs that we have to maintain our schools. We have our schools on roofing schedules, parking lot schedules, flooring schedules, and various other needs that occur. The list is long. We also, safety is a priority in our district. $750,000 of that new money was earmarked for safety. Okay, so how have we done? Well, we've accomplished our goals. The teachers and classifieds were given a 7.5% pay increase last year, the highest increase in decades. Funding was provided to special ed and categorical programs where appropriations did not keep up with costs. Funding was provided to help keep up with maintenance schedules, roofing, flooring, parking lots, etc. We hadn't raised the maintenance budget in years on that, and so that $1.7 million was very needed. And to date, of the $750,000, we have almost $800,000 that's been spent or encumbered for safety needs. These include installation of security locks, construction of security entryway vestibules, replacement of curtain walls in 6 schools, installation of cameras and door upgrades. The balance, the $42,000 overage, will be covered by existing capital budgets. And remember, this safety money is ongoing, so it'll pop up every year, which is pretty cool. And Superintendent Butters already talked about our efforts. Right now, we're using federal ESSER monies and other state one-time monies to equip schools with audio enhancement systems. I can't emphasize enough how awesome these are, because they're a dual two-edged sword. They simultaneously provide state-of-the-art security and alarm systems, and they also help with education, because I don't know if you ever taught a classroom. I have. Your voice gets worn out, and there are studies that show that these audio enhancement systems help with education. So it's a really cool thing. How we raised our taxes. It was painful for many, but so where do we still line up? With the district tax rate comparison, on the Wasatch Front, we went from 13th or 14th to 13th. We moved up 1 with that tax increase, okay? And when it comes to certified rates, the reason why I say certified rates, these are rates that are in the district's control, and they provide funding for M&O and capital. We went from 14th to 13th on that. So we're still well below the average. Then I said, I'm going to compare to the districts that are like us, because it's hard to compare with Salt Lake and Murray and Ogden and those city districts. So I took large suburban districts, and on the total levy, we are last. And then on the certified rate levy, we are below the average, but we're 5th out of 7. If we had the average on this certified rate levy, we would generate almost $9 million if we just had the average. If we were equal to our big neighbor to the south, Davis, we'd have an additional $12.6 million. It's great that we're sensitive to the needs of taxpayers, but at the same time, there's things our children are going without because the funding compared to other districts is not as robust. And we have a strategic plan that we're working on, and we see great things coming in the future. Next slide. The last slide is child nutrition programs. I always end on a food note, you know, that's the way it goes. So you can see the revenue, this revenue line is interesting on the federal. For 3 years, we averaged in the 6s. And then COVID hit, and the federal government gave huge subsidies, $11.5 million and then $17 million. And so our total revenue, but then our school lunch fees sales at the same time dropped because we weren't getting the we didn't need to charge money because all the lunches were paid by the federal government. This is the estimate for the coming year. We estimate that we'll go back to pre-COVID levels on the federal, that the state will go back to pre-COVID levels, and the lunch sales will go back to pre-COVID levels, okay? Our biggest bugaboo that's hit us lately is the food. You can see 5 years ago, our food was 5.2 million, then 5, then 5, then 5.5 million, then it jumped to 7 million. over 7 million in 1 year. And all of us that have gone to a fast food restaurant know, or have shopped at the grocery store, that the inflation costs have been significant. Okay, and we are doing things to address that, to lower those costs. So the fund balances grew during these times. They grew to 6.9 million. That is larger than what the state likes, and so we're spending that down. And we're spending it on the food costs have helped us spend that down, and then also we're giving modest increase to help families for lunch prices. We're proposing that they be raised by 10 cents. My year on this presentation is off. That should be 22, 23. That should be 22 or 23, 24. So that's the proposed for 23, 24. Okay, next. For the rest of this, and I won't go over these, but with these numbers, Seth Pilkington, our Assistant Business Administrator, takes these and he fills out voluminous state reports that are due 30 days after this presentation. And this just shows you the actuals for 22, the final budget for 23, and the proposed budget for 24, and it goes by functions and fund. And you can look at that at your leisure. The important thing, President, is that this is our last chance to approve the fiscal year 23 budget. So we need a vote on that, and we can do that after public comment. And then we also need a second vote to approve the fiscal year 24 coming up working budget. And that's my presentation. So I'll turn the time back to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dr. Peterson. The meeting's now open for public comment, and we invite members of the audience to address the board if they would like. Those wishing to speak were asked to fill in their name and address on the sign-up sheet provided at the entrance. We'd ask those who would like to participate to limit your comments to 3 minutes. We had one sign up, Mr. David Hanson. We welcome you to our meeting tonight. Mr. Hanson, when you come up, will you just state your name, your address, and the city that you're from, please?
David Hanson, I live in Liberty. I did attend the approval budget hearing last year. And at that time, there's been a lot of information that's been presented here today that has answered a lot of my questions. But I do want to make the comment of this, that last year, my tax rate went up 40%. The budget you have shown here, my taxes for the school district alone went up 52%. I'm really concerned when I see the 23-24 proposed budget that you're looking at going another 72 million to 79,000. It sounds to me like you're looking at another tax increase this year. I'm very concerned with that. I am mostly retired, and I don't know when you've ever had a budget 30% increase or 50% increase. I've never received that kind of a salary increase in my life. I've got a PhD in engineering, but we're looking at being very concerned about budgets. Please consider us and remember that we have to, my salary is no longer increasing. I can't sustain these types of increases in my home. To live in my home, I can't sustain that. So as you look at budgets, I understand all of the issues. I'm in engineering. I understand construction cost increases, but I'm very concerned when I see numbers like this that they're going to continue. They're going to take another big jump this year. And what I would really like to see, and unless I've missed it, I would really like to see what your projected budget increase was with the tax increase you imposed last year versus what really came in because of the increased valuations of homes. That's where my 50% increase hit, is my home value went up significantly. So when you take a look at that, please be cautious and careful, because I can't sustain those types of increases.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson, if you would like, if you have some time, grab Dr. Peterson after and walk through a couple of those things if you'd like to.
Okay, thank you.
You'd be able, okay? Wonderful. Thank you. That Mr. Peterson, or excuse me, Mr. Hanson, I'm sorry, was the only one who signed up for this public comment portion of the meeting, and so we'll now formally close the budget hearing. And I'd like to, and I'd like to call for a motion to approve the 22-23 budget. And a second.
22, 23, is
The 22-23,
closing that.
closing it, excuse me. Comments?
I don't know whether this fits under 22, 23, 23, 24, but I am concerned parents supported the tax increase because of the emphasis on school safety needs. And $750,000 was allowed for that. And I read that we have to date spent $42.05 above the projected. And I'm thinking we have not secured the school district in many ways that we're hoping to, and I just wonder, as we go forward, how do we accomplish these safety needs that have yet to be fulfilled?
Is that still part of our ESSER funding that we're looking at?
Yeah, I can speak to that,
addressing those
Janice.
safety?
I appreciate the concern and the question. When you think about $750,000 dog-eared for safety, and we've spent above and beyond that, that tells you that we have invested everything we promised that we would with the tax increase. We've been able to put safety vestibules, single entry vestibules into every one of our elementaries across the last few years, and especially some of that money went to that particular endeavor this year. We've got junior highs and high school on the docket right now, where we've encumbered some of that funding to go towards vestibules and single entry at those schools. You know, I think that Robert hit this piece in his presentation, but I'll just repeat it. We have added security locks and changed out classroom locks mechanisms, and we're planning to continue to do that across the next few years with that increased revenue that will come in from that rate increase. If Lane were here, I know he would say, there he is, Lane's in the back there, and I want to give him a shout out. Lane has done a comprehensive needs assessment in every one of our schools, so we know exactly going forward what needs to be done in phases, and we have a plan moving forward in terms of security, entrances, locks on doors, and that also includes, Janice, our audio enhancement ads. One thing we do have the luxury of right now is that federal money, that one-time money, and so of course we're braiding that funding with some of these upgrades to make sure that we utilize that money.
That will be 3, because we're using 2 till September, right? And then you have additional.
Then we have
funds.
ESSER 3, which is our final allocation, federal money allocation. And there's a sizable chunk we're planning to carve out of that. We'll see how some of the other needs that we have that money has been committed to, but we're planning to continue that AE advancement in our schools. No. Do we have every one of our 45 schools where they need to be? No. But we have a very systemic plan, a good understanding of what's needed in each school, and a plan moving forward in terms of making sure that we fortify our schools. So I feel really, really hopeful and comfortable, and we will utilize that $750,000 to its fullest extent every year on safety-related endeavors.
Thank you.
If you have been at a school, you will know that those single entry vestibules have certainly changed our procedure of entering a school. that it is a significant difference
Yes.
of getting into a school, and so the fortification of the safety of students has been a primary change. I know because I worked there before, and now to get into the school,
Yep.
I have to really
Yes, I agree. I visited one of our schools and appreciated the entry, and the principal, bless his heart, said, yeah, we've got some people complaining that it's inconvenient. And I thought, oh boy, we want the inconvenience that will protect our children.
Absolutely. Janice, I'd also like to go on record and just make a comment back to what I indicated about Lane's work. His needs analysis has been so extensive, we're not only looking at our buildings, we're looking at our building and grounds. So where are potential challenges, weak spots? We're looking at entry, places folks can enter, and we've discovered that we have some work to do on a lot of our grounds. And so I feel really comfortable in saying that we know where we're headed. And we will phase that plan in and get better every year.
I appreciate that because I know this is number one on the list for parents, for families, for community is our school safety. Thank you.
You're good. Okay, anything else on that? Sorry about, oh,
We need a second.
okay. Doug made the motion. Did we get a second? I thought Jan seconded that.
I did.
Sorry about that. That was confusing, my fault. Okay, let's move on, and I would ask for a motion to approve the proposed initial working 23-24 budget as presented by Dr. Peterson.
Did we get a vote on that? We didn't get a vote on that previous motion.
Can we just start over? Because, like I said, I think I have both feet in my mouth and I'm still talking.
It's okay.
Okay.
You have your two motions.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks for keeping me straight. It's a hard thing to do. All right. Now I would call for a motion to approve the proposed initial working 2023-2024 budget as presented by Dr. Peterson. Would anyone like to make that motion? Kelly and Jan, any discussion on that, the 23-24 budget? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Did we get it straight? Did I get it straight? All right. Well, that concludes our board meeting. Tonight, board, I'd like to entertain a motion to conclude the board meeting. Kelly, a second. Janice, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thanks. We'll take a short break here for a few minutes. And at 7:15, we will reconvene to establish the local building authority of the Weber School District. Thank you. Education. The purpose of this meeting is to formally organize the local building authority. I would ask for a motion to move that the normal rules of order be waived and that the following persons be elected to serve as officers of this authority until their successors are duly elected and qualified. Paul Widdowson as president, John Ritchie as vice president, Dr. Robert D. Peterson as secretary and treasurer. So moved.
Seconded.
Doug. A second by Jan. Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed to that? Thank you.
Paul, I have a question for Ryan.
Yes.
On these motions, are any of them going to be a roll call vote? Okay.
Oh, good
Just
question.
want to be prepared if they were. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we, as you can see by your agenda, we have a lot of motions, so work with me here. I would accept a motion that the form of bylaws submitted at this meeting be adopted as the official bylaws of this authority.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Jan. Janice is a second. Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I would look for a motion to move that the seal presented at this meeting be adopted as the official seal of this authority. Rob? Wonderful. Thanks. Doug made the motion, a second. Kelly, any questions, discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Moving on to number 5, I would look for a motion to move that the president, any vice president, and the secretary and treasurer be authorized to execute on behalf of the authority any and all employment agreements, deeds, leases, contracts, purchase orders, assignments, notes, bonds, mortgages, deeds of trust, and other instruments or documents that may be necessary or desirable in connection with the conduct of the affairs of the authority. Okay.
Any one of these, or does it have to be 2?
That's a good question. It could vary depending on what it is. That's what it sounded like. I would ask for a motion for that one. Kelly, a second, please.
Second.
Jan, any discussion on number 5? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed to that? Thank you. Number 6, I would look for a motion to move that the Board of Trustees of the authority hold regular meetings from time to time as the Board of Trustees shall deem necessary on the same dates and at the same times and the places as regular meetings of the Board of Education of Weber School District, Utah, and that required notices shall be given as required by Chapter 4 of Title 52 Utah Code, annotated 1953, as amended, and any successor provisions thereto. I'd look for that motion.
Can I ask a question on
Please.
that, Paul? So will that be separate as is tonight? Those will be separate meetings?
That's
So
my
just-
understanding, yes.
So just to make that clarified.
It would be held the same day and time as our regular board
But
meetings.
it's a separate meeting.
But it's a separate meeting because the building authority is a separate entity.
Okay, I'll make that motion that the Board of Trustees of Authority hold those regular meetings.
Thank you. A second? Any discussion? Oh, Janice, sorry. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Number 7, I would look for a motion to move that any and all actions taken by the officers of the authority prior to the date of this organizational meeting are hereby ratified, confirmed, and approved as the act and deed of the authority. Can you explain that?
Isn't it just the stuff we've already signed is ratified?
It's kind of what, all those positions that Robert said, doing filings, or that's just that.
Okay.
Corporation, you're going, those sorts of actions.
Wonderful. Thanks. Okay. All right. I'd look for that motion. Kelly, a second.
Second.
Jan, any discussion on that? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
Before we
Yes, Doug, go ahead.
adjourn, just a question, going back to number 5. So I move that the president, any vice president, and the secretary, should that read and vice president?
So we left it as any, just in case at some point in time, maybe
We
designate
have more vice
vice
president?
presidents.
Okay,
Just to keep
any vice, okay.
optionality there, though we have seen some boards that have a first and a second vice president.
Perfect,
Okay,
okay. I like that, that gives,
Thank you for the explanation.
thank you.
gives more flexibility. Great.
Do we have any other questions? Robert?
Grateful that Ryan has come here to help us.
Yes.
And then I'm also grateful that Matt Dugdale is here. He's
you.
been a great help in all these type of things throughout this process, and he will help us greatly moving forward.
Yes. We appreciate their help and we hope that their companies pay them mileage.
That's right. This is as close as you can come to perpetual motion, isn't it?
Yes. All right, board, with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn this
So
meeting.
moved.
Doug, a second by Janice. Any discussion, any further questions? We have the two experts here with us. If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks.
Safe travels.